You also have to go to anywhere you can buy a book and get Underdogs, the Philadelphia Eagles' emotional road to Super Bowl victory, both provided by Zach Berman, at ZBerm on Twitter, covering all things Eagles for the Inquirer Daily News. Harry Mays, Eytan, Shander. Zach, we love you, my friend. Always great to have you on. Thank you for coming on today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and I appreciate that introduction.
Oh, of course. I was telling Harry this, and I didn't get into the specifics. I don't know if you remember, but this must have been like a year ago. And you were on, God bless him, because we both love him to death. You were on with Joe Stazak, and Joe could not get your introduction, your title right with what you were doing, and you kept correcting him, and he kept getting it wrong. And Zach, I'm in the car texting the producer at the time. I think it was Devon who was producing at the time, and I just, with like 16 crying emojis, because you were doing your best to fix it, and every time you corrected him, Stazak continued to get it wrong.
Nah, that's all good. You know, that matters more for my bosses. For me, I just like talking football with you guys.
I love it, man.
That's outstanding.
I was saying that you were unknowingly part of one of the funniest radio moments I've ever seen, and all you were doing is just trying to clear it up. We love it, Zach. All right, Harry,
yeah.
Do you want to start? Because you are geeked up.
I am geeked up. I know
night.
there's not as much buzz about this draft locally here in Philadelphia because they're drafting down further in the first round, and who knows if they're going to stay there. There's Howie can always trade up or trade out of the first round, which he's done before. What is your sense, Zach, as to the Eagles staying at 25 and letting a player that they have near the top of their board fall to them, or they get a little antsy and Howie uses some of his assets and slides up a few slots to get a guy that they really covet, or they move back? What do you think ends up happening as far as movement?
Yeah, it's interesting because there should be more buzz here. This is a chance to be really one of the defining drafts for the Eagles in recent years when you look at the fact that they have 3 picks in the top 57.
Mm-hmm.
As far as what they're going to do, it really depends on when the early run of quarterbacks on when the run of quarterbacks comes and when the run of wide receivers comes. And what I mean by that is if there are 4 quarterbacks who go in the top 17 or perhaps even higher, there's going to be some good players who move down the board.
Yeah.
I think the Eagles are going to have a cutoff there, and I wouldn't rule the Eagles out trading up if there's a guy they feel has elite potential who's there in the teens. So not top 10, maybe not top 12, but I'd say after top 12, if a guy's there that they think could be a Pro Bowler, I think the Eagles have the chips to trade up.
And it would probably be a defensive lineman, right?
Yes, it would be a defensive lineman. I feel pretty confident that they're going to take a defensive lineman if they draft in the first round. I know there's a lot of Marquise Brown buzz, and I get it, and you can't rule it out. But when you look at the way Howie Roseman values the position, when you look at the fact that there's some really good to potentially elite D linemen in this class, I think they come out of Friday night with a defensive lineman, or Thursday night with a defensive lineman.
Okay, so as far as chips to move up, I imagine the biggest one would be Nelson Aguilar?
No, the biggest one would be their second round pick.
Yeah,
okay.
More so than a current player. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think a current player is going to get you very high in the first round. A current player might be used to supplement some picks on day 3 of the draft, but the chip they have is 2 second-round picks. They haven't had 3 picks in the top 57 since 1994, and you can make an argument that they should draft all 3 because since 2000, they've had 4 times when they've had 3 picks in the first 2 rounds. They've landed a Pro Bowler in 3 of those 4 drafts.
Hey, Zach, how early do you think they pull the trigger on a safety?
I would say second round. I think that's where the strength of safety class is. When you look at, I would pay attention to corners who've moved over to safety. So Chauncey Gardner-Johnson from Florida. I would look at Juan Thornhill from Virginia, Darnell Savage from Maryland, and Nazir Adderley from Delaware. Those are 4 guys to pay attention to.
Zach Berman.
They love that versatility, don't they? Like that, the ability to play 2 positions.
Yeah, that's really what they're thinking about is they like to talk about it almost like positionless football. Put your 5 best or 6 best defensive backs on the field and mix and match. That's what they want to do.
And this is really a big year. I don't mean to cut you off,
No,
Eytan, for
go.
Sidney Jones. I mean, this is going to be a season where
Make or break, right?
The Eagles coaching staff and the fan base, is wanting to see him, measure up to that potential that he apparently had before getting injured, right?
They're still bullish on Sidney Jones. Spoke to a few people in the organization about him this off season, and they looked at last year like his rookie year. They knew when they drafted him, year one was going to be a redshirt year. It was mixed returns last year, but frankly, they thought before he got hurt earlier in the season, he was really taking to the slot, was playing well. I think there's a lot of optimism still in the organization about Sidney Jones.
Yeah, despite Harry, Donovan McNabb saying that if they don't make it to the NFC Championship game this year, they have to replace Sidney Jones.
Oh, right. That was after he talked about Wentz. Yeah.
Exactly right. Zach Berman joining us at Z. Don't worry, Zach. We're not going to ask you about Donovan McNabb.
No.
Okay, you're free from that. We want you to come back on the show.
Right.
We saved that for Kemsky. All right, so let me ask you. You only have one. You can only choose one. What's more likely to happen? Eagles move up, Eagles move out.
I can only choose one.
Yep.
I would say, I'm going to say Eagles move up because I think there's going to be an early run on quarterbacks. If you asked me yesterday,
wow,
I would have said Eagles move out. But when I look at it now, I just think that that if they can get a top 20 player or let's say a top 15 player, they're going to try to do it. Now, I don't say that with much confidence, but I see Howie working very hard.
Hey, Zach, let's go to the offensive line. Obviously, Jason Peters is at the end. We hope to get 16 games, and playoffs out of him this year. But at some point, it's going to end. Give me your thoughts on this draft. I know there's a lot of good interior linemen available as well. If they go offensive line, do you think it would be one of these guys, that could play guard and maybe switch to tackle, or are they particularly interested in a tackle?
No, I think it's the first thing you mentioned there. I don't think they're going to be looking at it like let's get the left tackle of the future. I think they would really value like guard tackle versatility because they have a few spots opening in these next few years, and they have a few guys who can play different spots as it is when you talk about Lane Johnson's ability to play the right and the left. So I look at a player like Cody Ford, Chris Lindstrom from Boston College. If you keep going down, Dalton Risner from Kansas State. Those are some players I'd pay attention to there.
Zach Berman, our guest at ZBerm. Are you down in Nashville yet?
I'm not. I'm going to be at the team facility tomorrow night. So I'm going to be
I was curious about that.
Howie and Doug and Joe Douglas after the draft.
See, he's buried in the war room, man. He's not going down to party.
Not in the war room. I wish. If Howie would send me the code to get in, I'd be happy to do it, but I don't think that's happening.
No? I'm sure that there's somebody in there that can slip you the code. It doesn't have to be Howie.
I'll try. I'll work on it. Yeah.
Do you think this might be the last draft for Joe Douglas with the Eagles?
That's a good question.
It's a really good question. I don't know. I guess I would have to say no. If you're talking about a GM job, that would probably happen after the season. If you're talking about just moving to a different organization, that's what happens after the draft. Frankly, I think at this point, if he were to move on, it would probably be after a season. But I don't know, and I'll say this: I think this is a real big draft for Joe Douglas. There's been mixed returns on his 2 drafts, and Joe's a real sharp guy. Has a lot of courage in his kind of in his scouting convictions, and I think he's done a good job. And I think the book's not closed on some of these guys that he's drafted, whether you're talking about Sidney Jones or Matt Collins. Or Josh Sweat, you going down the list, but I think he has a chance here with 3 picks in the top 57 to really make a mark, and he needs to do it because they need an infusion of young talent. They simply haven't had enough high picks in recent years, and this is a chance to add 3 starters.
So what is the biggest criticism? And knowing that drafts take years, what's the biggest criticism that's come down with Joe Douglas?
Well, I think you look at the Donnell Pumphrey pick, and that's the one that
that was a
stands
head
out.
scratcher.
And it's a 4th-round pick, so you can't, kill him for it. But that's a draft that was absolutely loaded with running back talent. And you look now, I think there are over 10 starting running backs in the league who were drafted that year. Whether you're talking – and some of those guys you were not going to get. Christian McCaffrey, he didn't drop to 14. Leonard Fournette, he didn't drop to 14. But when you look at Dalvin Cook and I mean, you saw Kareem Hunt got cut, but Kareem Hunt was a high-level player. I mean, Marlon Mack, who was drafted after Donnell Pumphrey. There was a lot of talent in that draft, and the Eagles took a guy who was the all-time leading rusher in college football history when they drafted him. There was a lot of potential there. But I think one thing that they should really look at is the value they place on college production relative to NFL projection.
Now, there's one thing, you got to look at it on the other side, too. Dallas Goedert looks like a stud to me. Avonte Maddox looks like a player that's going to contribute at a large level for them. And if this Jordan Mailata thing works out, that could be, I mean, you just think about that, Zach. If you believe what they're telling us, how he's progressed, immensely, and he's really starting to pick things up. If they could get him to be a starter, can you imagine like what that would do?
Oh, I agree with you. I think last year has a lot of potential, and also 2017 draft. I mean, Derek Barnett, before he got hurt last year, I thought he was really coming on. I think Derek Barnett's going to be a Pro Bowl player here. But yes, if you found Jason Peters' replacement in the 7th round, and it's an Australian player who did not play football until you brought him into the building. That would really be a credit to that scouting staff.
Zach, thanks, brother.
Good, great stuff,
Anytime,
man.
guys.
At
Thank you.
Berm. Yeah, we got it, man. We'll talk soon. Thank you.
And by the way, my pick is Dexter Lawrence. If they stick at 25, I want to roll out Jeffrey Simmons.
Okay.
All right, Dexter Lawrence from Clemson.
And who's the first person to die Game of Thrones Sunday night?
Oh, jeez.
I actually don't watch Game of Thrones.
See?
I figured.
NBA playoffs.
No, I figured.
Yes, he's watching sports. Okay? He doesn't,
Trust me,
he doesn't
I'd be
concern
shocked.
himself with that
I'd be
nonsense.
shocked if people working as hard as Zach had a time to look up and actually watch TV like that. Thank you, brother.
Anytime, guys. Thanks.